You know, Ramadan is so much more than just a month of fasting. It's really a complete journey with a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. So, in this explainer, we're going to trace that entire life cycle from the very first sliver of a new moon all the way to the final celebration. And we'll be using a 10th century Islamic legal text, the Risala of Ibn Abi Zayd, as our guide.
So we've broken this whole journey down into 6 key stages. We're going to start with the absolute core of it all. What even is the fast? Then we'll see how the month officially kicks off and get into the nitty-gritty of the daily rules and, importantly, the exemptions. From there, we'll explore the real spiritual heart of the practice before we finally get to how the month wraps up.
All right, first things first. Before we dive into all the rules and rituals, let's lay the groundwork. What does it actually mean to fast in the context of Ramadan?
So the Arabic word for fasting, siyam, it's got this really cool dual meaning. On a basic level, in the language, it just means to restrain yourself from something. But in Islamic law, the Sharia, it's way more specific. It's about consciously restraining our most basic physical appetites from the moment dawn breaks until the sun sets. And this is key. It only counts if it's done with a specific intention to worship.
And look, this isn't just a friendly suggestion. The source text makes it absolutely crystal clear that fasting in Ramadan is a foundational obligation in Islam. It's not up for debate. Its authority comes from 3 unshakable pillars: the Quran itself, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, known as the Sunnah, and the unanimous agreement of centuries of scholars.
Okay, so we've established it's a huge obligation. But how does the month actually begin? It's this fascinating mix of a big, community-wide event and a person's own quiet, individual intention. See, the start of Ramadan is all tied to the lunar calendar, so it begins in one of 2 ways. The main way is for people to physically go out and look for the new crescent moon right after sunset. But what if it's cloudy, or you just can't see it? Well, there's a simple backup plan. The community just finishes out the current month, Shaban, to a full 30 days, and Ramadan automatically starts the very next day. It's a really beautiful, practical system that has worked for centuries.
All right, so once the community has figured out the start date, the focus really zooms in on you, the individual. For your fast to be valid, you have to have the right intention, or niyyah. And this is where the Maliki school, which our source text follows, has a really interesting take. They say that one single intention made right at the start of the month is good enough for all 30 days. They see the entire month as one single, continuous act of worship. This actually makes things a lot simpler because some other schools say you have to renew that intention every single night.
The month has started. Your intention is locked in. Now what? What actually happens during the day itself? Let's get into the specific rules that you have to navigate from dawn all the way to dusk.
This breaks down some of the real nitty-gritty practical questions people always ask. For example, using a traditional toothstick, a sawak, totally fine, any time of day. What about something like cupping? Also allowed, as long as it doesn't make you super weak. A lot of the time, the key principle comes down to whether something was intentional or not. Like, if you get sick and throw up, your fast is still good. But if you make yourself do it, well, that breaks the fast, and you've got to make that day up later. Now, even though the rules are pretty clear-cut, Islamic law is also incredibly merciful. It builds in a ton of flexibility for when, life just happens. So, who actually gets a pass from fasting? And what happens when a fast is broken for a good reason? And this right here is a perfect example of that mercy in action. There are several groups of people who are permitted to not fast. We're talking about people on long-distance journeys, anyone who's sick and would be harmed by fasting, pregnant or nursing moms who are worried about their health or their child's, and the elderly who just physically can't do it. For them, fasting isn't required, but they do have to make up the days they miss later on once their situation changes. But what happens if someone deliberately breaks their fast and they don't have one of these valid excuses? Well, the consequence is pretty serious. It's not enough to just make up that one day later. Breaking the sanctity of a Ramadan fast on purpose also requires something called kafara, which is a prescribed act of expiation. This expiation gives you one of 3 choices. The first, and most common today, is to feed 60 people in need. The second, which reflects the historical context of the text, is to free a slave. And the third is to fast for 2 whole months, straight, without a single break. It's interesting. The source text actually says the Maliki school preferred that first option, feeding the poor, because it has a direct, positive benefit for the whole community. And yeah, let's just lock in that number, 60. That's 60 different people you have to feed, not just giving one person 60 meals. It really drives home the social dimension of this act and just how serious it is to violate a Ramadan fast without cause. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on the do's and don'ts, the external stuff. But our source text is super clear that Ramadan is about so much more than just not eating and drinking. Let's dive into the internal spiritual side of the month. Check out this powerful narration from the source text. It paints this amazing picture of your own body parts talking to your tongue every morning, basically saying, hey, if you stay on the straight and narrow, so will we. But if you start causing trouble, we're all going down with you. It's this idea that your entire body is fasting, not just your stomach. Controlling your speech, steering clear of arguments, gossip, and lies is just as vital as controlling your hunger. And then there's this other huge spiritual practice, the special nightly prayers called Tarawih. It's really interesting how our text shows the practice actually evolved over time. Back in the days of the Caliph Omar, the standard was 20 cycles of prayer. But a century later, by the time of Imam Malik, the community in the holy city of Medina was praying 36. And this wasn't to make it harder, it was actually to make it easier. They used shorter recitations in each cycle, adapting the practice so more people could participate while still increasing the overall feeling of devotion. And for people who want to go even deeper, to really max out that spiritual connection, there's something called itikaf. This is a spiritual retreat where a person basically secludes themselves in the mosque, especially during the final 10 nights of Ramadan. They dedicate all their time to prayer, remembrance, and reading the Quran. And according to the Maliki school, you can't do a valid itikaf unless you are also fasting. The two are just deeply fundamentally linked. So we've walked through the rules, we've dived into the spirit of the month, and now we've finally arrived at the end of our journey. The conclusion of Ramadan is marked by one final beautiful act of charity, and then a huge celebration. But wait, before the month is officially over, there's one last crucial duty to perform. It's called Zakat al-Fitr. The text calls it an obligatory sunnah, which basically means it was so heavily emphasized by the Prophet that it carries the weight of being mandatory. It's a special charity that's meant to purify any shortcomings in your fast. The head of the household gives a certain amount of staple food, like rice, flour, or dates, on behalf of every single person in their family, from the newborn baby to the oldest grandparent. And the timing on this charity is super important. You can't just do it whenever. The obligation technically kicks in at sunset on the very last day of Ramadan. You're allowed to pay it a day or two early, but the absolute best, most recommended time is on the morning of the festival, right before everyone goes to the big community prayer. And the reason for that timing is just so beautiful. It's to make absolutely sure that everyone, especially the poorest people in the community, has food and can celebrate the day with dignity. And that brings us to the big celebration itself, Eid al-Fitr. The source text points out some of these simple, lovely traditions from the Prophet, things like eating an odd number of dates before you leave for the prayer. And then this one, you take one path to get to the prayer grounds and you take a totally different path to get home. The idea is to spread the joy, to see and greet as many people in your community as you can. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, from sighting the moon to that final charity, it's just so clear that Ramadan isn't just about not eating for 30 days, right? It's a complete system, a full life cycle of worship that's designed to shape you as an individual, to shape your character, and to strengthen your ties to the entire community. And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. How does seeing it this way, as a complete journey, really change how we understand the practice itself?